This is Making Healthcare Sustainable, brought to you by Lantern. When it comes to benefits communication, most organizations are still guessing, sending emails, and hoping something sticks. Today, I'm joined by Kaitlin Quinn, VP of Data and Analytics at Lantern. Over the past 6 months, her team has been running a serious marketing testing program that's generating real, actionable findings about what drives employees to engage with their benefits. We're going to dig into what they learned, what surprised them, and how benefits leaders can start building their own testing practices. Kaitlin, welcome. So glad to have you.
Thank you, Nancy. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Your team has been running a serious testing program for a while now. I would love to hear a specific example of a test that you ran, what you were trying to learn, and what you found.
Yeah, absolutely. So I joined Lantern in September of 2025. And when I arrived, we had really very directional, but very good confidence marked understanding of the fact that targeted marketing, because it's the best practice in the marketing area in general and in this function, that it is the best way to go to drive utilization and engagement by our members. It's marketing 101. It absolutely is something that you should enable across any industry. And it ultimately creates a personalized message based on need for an individual so that it's not a broad blast of all marketing material to all members that we cover. It's very specific to those individuals who truly do have a need. Not all of our clients are enrolled in that. It's absolutely voluntary. And so our job was to effectively identify true hard dollar, hard concrete evidence of improvement in engagement and overall savings validation and driving of that via targeted marketing offering to each client. And so in doing that, what that comes is it comes with a cost, right? Because data itself is something that's a differentiator in any market today. But in order to procure that information and then that insight to then drive to concrete recommendations for our clients, you have to create a testing program that's robust enough and large enough to drive real statistically significant findings. And to do that, we needed a very large audience, which effectively means that we needed to create a fold-out group, meaning a test and control group, and get that hard evidence of saying, hey, it drives X% increase in engagement when you have TMO or targeted marketing enabled versus when you don't. And that was a hard sell, especially for a startup in growth mode, especially for the demand and the good things that our services bring to both clients and members, right? So that was something that we wanted to deliberately, I was tasked with, I think, from day one of entering Lantern in September of last year of saying, we need to get to concrete evidence because we really need to be able to articulate the value and the impact this can make on a client's member base by intervening at the right time when their need arises. And so we were able to do that. It took about 3 months, which you don't necessarily need that robustness of tests to test everything, especially when it's, it could be a website feature versus a change in a subject line on an email. Those certainly don't need as big of an audience or as much of a robust test and control variant to actually get to that outcome. But for this, it's such an integral part of our business that we wanted concrete findings that we could then consistently redo every year to refresh and hopefully see even more impact. And so that was luckily something that everyone was on board with. Everyone decided, yep, it's worth the sacrifice and potential, the inability to reach out in order to get to those findings to then create long-term impact for our clients and our members. And it had very concrete outcomes. We saw a 20% lift in those clients that actually had TMO enabled versus did not. And ultimately, that's because not only is our service adjacent to, benefits offerings for clients and for members, we are also explaining what Lantern is, why it's useful, in addition to saying, and we know that it could be useful to you because you are in the process of identifying surgical care or getting surgical care at whatever stage that might be. And so being able to intervene at the right time, of course, the really great marketing principles of finding them right where they are, where they should be at the right time is very core to that. And being able to do that via a targeted marketing offering and being able to get the data to actually create that ability to reach out to those members is critical for that. So that was a really, really exciting, groundbreaking test that actually just wrapped in May. We've got really concrete outcomes from it that we're really proud of. And we're then taking to market. And obviously with a lot of our narratives and speaking with clients about the value it brings.
Yeah. And, a 20% lift, that's significant. And I think it makes so much sense, knowing the background of when we're reaching out to those members, those signals, in their claims data that they are looking for surgery versus just somewhat randomly learning about Lantern. And, we just are all bombarded with so much information. There are studies that you have to see something 7 times before it sticks. I think that number is higher now just in our world of information overload. So you could have seen something about Lantern, but then forgotten it by the time you do have a moment of need. So I can totally see how that targeted piece would lead to those results.
Yeah, especially within this industry, right? You think of targeted marketing when you think of a retailer, right? Being able to present a pair of jeans when someone's been searching for a pair of jeans in Google and being able to directly put that in front of them on Instagram when they hop over. It's a very similar concept, but when it comes to healthcare, it's so personal and so private that it needs to be done with an extreme amount of care and patience and consideration. I think that because of that, we almost over-index in doing nothing when it comes to targeted marketing across all healthcare segments. But in reality, when someone is in need of a surgery, especially one that's going to bring them reprieve, like a knee replacement, they want options. They want a customized service. They want something that's going to make that process as easy and as possible and as financially conscious as it possibly can be. And so we know our service can drive value. We want to be able to reach those people at their time of need. The only way to do that is to obtain the data to actually create that signal and then to intervene at the appropriate time and avoid intervening at the inappropriate times. That can then hopefully drive great experience for our members and then ultimately word of mouth spread of that experience, which drives better conversion for us ultimately. Word of mouth, like most other brands, is our highest converting inbound channel. And so great experience is part of that. And a great experience starts with intervening at the time's need.
And when we talk to benefits leaders, I know some are more hesitant, but have you heard of people who were kind of maybe convinced by the data or who started out unsure and were convinced that this would be effective and not overly intrusive for their population?
Yeah, we certainly have. And I think ultimately because there's an enormous amount of logic that goes into using the claims data that we get for our members to then act on it. And one thing I'm really proud of is that we've got a really robust targeted marketing offering process and function that's not only identified a way, of course, of obtaining that inbound data, but then applying really conscious and careful logic to include those situations and scenarios that can certainly and most reliably lead to a surgical need, and excluding those that are on the fringe, right? And saying we're not going to over-index and just cast a massive net. We talk about just sending, blasting an email to everyone in our entire network as a wide net. But then there's layers of that. And even if you take, go back down a layer and down a layer and down a layer into the onion, we're still not even maybe halfway into the onion as to where we stop. And that's really out of an abundance of care. And it's done because of really robust logic to identify somebody who's right before they're about to go to surgery. Maybe they're right before they're about to go into their consult, and maybe they've just seen a specialist for the first time, right? And so there's levels of intervention, and there's areas in which, right before surgery, they are absolutely on their way to the OR. We want to go ahead and intervene immediately so that they get the benefit of our service. But then there's those other individuals that maybe have just seen a specialist. We need to be incredibly sure that that is something that would ultimately qualify for a Lantern benefit. And so there's layers and layers and layers of logic and exclusions and assumptions we then put onto that information to make crystal clear that that need is a true need and not something that's maybe a little bit more generic that could be a false signal. And I think that's really important in healthcare more than probably anything else, especially in retail and other areas, because you can put a pair of jeans in front of somebody who's looking for a shirt and they're not going to be, obviously harmed or feel personally violated as an outcome of that. That's not the case in healthcare and when we're getting this very personal information about our members.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure hearing about that level of care helps build trust in our approach to outreaching to members.
Yeah, it really does. And explaining that and taking the time to explain it to clients and taking them on the journey with us through the or member experience rather is a really important part of articulating that message. And so to your question, we have definitely seen a wide variety of clients sort of change their perspective, not only as an outcome of seeing how we've developed that logic across each of those stages of qualification, but also around generally how we tested it and said, like, we've really put our skin in the game here of ultimately sacrificing revenue in order to prove this point. And luckily, as an outcome of that, it was a pretty substantial savings amount, as well as revenue driving and utilization data.
Yeah, well, congrats to your team on that. And, I think that benefits leaders obviously taking advantage of programs like this through your vendors can make such a huge impact. But I think there's also a lot that they can try on a smaller scale. If you have a tool that does allow something like subject line testing, or if you want to, I know something we tried at Lantern was actually envelope color and testing, call rate from different things like that. So what are some maybe lower lift or simpler, but still, impactful tests that a benefits leader might be able to run?
I think there's like two different avenues, right? And it's really around if you're focused on awareness marketing or conversion marketing. From an awareness perspective, if you just want to make individuals within your organization aware that a benefit exists, that doesn't necessarily come with a lot of downstream signals that it worked. It's mostly just, a marketing 101 principle that you have to invest significantly in awareness marketing to just make individuals like conscious of something existing, let alone whether or not they want to use your service right away. But maybe in 9 months when they do want their knee surgery, they're going to remember that email they got from the benefits department around, hey, if we're going to tell you for the 45th time, here are your benefits. That's why they exist. And therefore, like, your success metrics for top of the funnel, the top, highest part of the funnel, which is awareness, they're going to be very different than your conversion metrics, which is utilization. And so from a benefit side of the house, what I think a big focus for Lantern is how can we help you drive that awareness? And what I believe to be like something very low lift around what those departments can do for their members is, in my opinion, a lot of customer success or like NPS ratings. So again, going back to the reference I made around word of mouth being our highest converter, the thing that drives the most utilization and individuals or members' confidence in a service potentially being right for them is the person sitting right next to them in the desk saying, hey, I just got a knee replacement through Lantern and it was awesome. So seamless, so quick. You should really check them out. It's a free service. It's like pet insurance, right? I think that's a good way of probably something that people talk about of what are the adjacent opportunities and benefits that an employer offers in addition to the main carrier benefit. In this case, because our business model is certainly complex, but it drives so much value, it's allowing them to relate to something that they've heard before of saying, this is really a really nice supplemental piece of my care journey that I've never heard of before, but I certainly should leverage. And so word of mouth and being able to drive that, I think, through surveying your members who have had the Lantern benefit, surveying your members who have used any of the benefits and getting their general opinion of how it went and what they would change and what they would do differently, or maybe what were their favorite parts of it. And then effectively putting those testimonials out to the entirety of the organization is massive, right? Those members want to hear from fellow members. They probably trust them the most. But then across the board in marketing material, whether it's an email or direct mail, or even the asset on the company's homepage, right? Just changing the dynamic a little bit to say, here's Lantern, this is what it's all about. And effectively having a spotlight every week of a different benefit offering for each of your within your benefit portfolio. I think there's a good amount of exposure opportunities, but then testing that is around impressions on the website and looking at just our general Google tags on how to actually get to that conclusion. Looking at open rates for emails. I mean, it doesn't have to be rocket science. You don't need an analytics team. This is coming from head data and analytics, but you don't need an analytics team to get to some intrinsic understanding of what email worked and which one didn't work. In general, if they opened it up and they actually engaged with it, even from just seeing it for the first time, that is a great indicator that it reached more people. And that could have been because the subject line was intriguing, but it could have been because of something else. It could have also been because of the preview, so you don't exactly know what they saw, but you know that something in that first exposure caused them to open that email. So that's where you want to poke in a little bit further of saying, what worked in that subject line that's different from all the others that actually drove more people to open that email? Let's then replicate that and create variants of that. It's fun. It's creative. I think that you can get a lot of value even out of the smallest metric. I would say one recommendation I have is try to look at least 2 metrics together versus just one as you're indicating in key metric of success versus failure, and see how those 2 things move in the same direction. And so I'd say if you're using the same asset, maybe in an email, put that same asset on the website and see how they do. Do they both drive value up? So then maybe it's the actual image itself. And so it's always nice to pressure test against 2 different mediums with the same asset or maybe the same copy, and to ensure that hey, it is actually this. It's not, just a point in time where everyone's kind of trying to find more information on benefits because election is next week. So you have to pressure test a little bit around the context and the scenario as well.
And to your point, I mean, I work in marketing and you work in data and analytics, so we do think this kind of thing is fun. But I've heard from a lot of benefits leaders that they have had to become marketers themselves, and some have even hired former marketers on their benefits team. But I think if you're someone who you haven't tried this kind of stuff out, ask your marketing team, see if they have a tool where you can send benefits emails through and you can start tracking these open rates and click-through rates and that kind of stuff, and just start experimenting. And I think every test is helpful, even if it doesn't work out. That teaches you something too.
100%. Or even adding a poll into an email or something where they have to get back to you, or maybe encouraging if you're in an outlet, the thumbs up or the heart in the corner. Any signal that it's being engaged with is a signal you can use to identify whether or not it's working. It doesn't have to be a request to IT to pull impressions, which I know can feel laborious, or to marketing. And luckily, I've helped everyone. It's a quick process for anyone on the benefits side who can actually to get to that information. But if it's not easy to get to that information, there are other things that you can leverage to actually give you some sense of, is this working? Do people care? Are people looking at this? And does it work? Because then you can then match with, hey, what are we seeing on the other side of the house with all of these benefit offerings and their engagement? You can match it to the timing of when you're sending these emails. It's a bit of a fun scavenger hunt sometimes, but I find that to be the really, really exciting when you see something, you've created something that's actually driven an action, and then you can see that validated at the end of the conversion cycle.
Exactly, yeah. And I know at Lantern, we do track referral sources. So was it word of mouth? Was it target marketing? Was it, a letter or an email that someone received? So I think your idea of running a testimonial program, at Lantern, we're happy to help show if word of mouth increased after that program. So probably for any vendor, they'd be happy to help run these kinds of experiments.
Yeah. And the majority of my experience has been in the marketing analytic via digital platforms. Seeing the outcomes of that, it's something that I get so much energy from, especially because of the amount of tools that you need to actually enable it is so few. You can drive so much value with a very small amount of technology enabled, tools available to you, data available to you, because there's a lot of room for experimentation and creativity in there from marketer and non-marketer. At Lantern, we really value it. We put a lot of credibility into it because we just know that that's what's very helpful, is to just inform individuals around what Lantern is and what their options are during a really hard time in their life, or something that they're facing that might be a little challenging or they're afraid of, or there's, fear associated to that. Our service in general brings a lot of reprieve to that. And then marketing that and saying, hey guys, did you know about this is good for good sake. And so a lot of times I really talk about Lantern and it's good for all parties involved. And that's something we really like to get out there. And that targeted marketing program is just one way of figuring out how to get that message out there. And I think the same goes for any benefits department.
It's good news. And we just talked about this on another podcast episode, that even if even if you're not someone who needs Lantern at that time, just hearing that your employer offers something that makes care more affordable and that your colleagues are using, there's really a halo effect. So I think targeted marketing is great, but even when everyone hears about it, there are definitely benefits in that too.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's really a show like the employer truly cares about their members and making their difficult times and difficult journeys in which they're away from work as easy as possible and as seamless as it possibly can be.
Yeah. Well, before I let you go, I know, and you mentioned before joining Lantern, you worked in digital marketing or digital analytics for a lot of retail companies. So I'm curious, what do you feel like Lantern or healthcare marketing has in common with retail marketing?
So depending on what retailer you work for, the demographic is very different, right? The demographic of the prior company I was at was around 18 years old. And obviously those mediums and the digital footprint that we need and like the ingredients to the secret sauce is so different than maybe like a Lantern with a slightly older demographic. And so what I think they have in common though is you really identifying somebody at the exact time of their need is the same across the board. Again, like the jeans example I mentioned, if we can intervene at the time that someone's looking for jeans on the digital marketing for a retailer, we are going to have such a higher percentage of conversion rate than if we were to catch them the next day when they completely forgot about them needing jeans and they're back at work or they're back doing their day-to-day. If the same goes for Lantern. And while our mechanisms today are very much like social driven, they're also email and direct mail via hard copy. Those things go in and out of popularity. I think a lot of people actually like getting mail these days. Again, it's back, And so, but I think intervening at just the right time, that makes a lot of sense. So is it right when they get their ID cards? Is it right when, like, if they have a couple of months? Is it right before they've hit their deductible before the end of the year? These are all considerations that we make of saying, not only do we want to find them at the time of need, but we also want to find them at the time that they're actually seeking a need too. And so the fundamentals of a, digital retailer and marketing space, as well as like what Lantern tries to accomplish via our targeted marketing offer are very similar. It's only going to work if it ultimately on a conversion basis, focused on driving people when they have a need or when they're about to have a need. And on an awareness perspective, making people aware that a service like Lantern even exists in the world. And that's a really important thing for a company like Lantern that's newer, that's like very beneficial to, again, all parties involved. It's a bit of a unicorn, right? Of saying like, wait, this actually can provide reprieve to this healthcare ecosystem that we're trying to navigate. And it's been pretty tricky lately. So we've got to balance very nicely the awareness and the conversion driving marketing efforts. And that's the same across any retailer, any company really on the planet. Is just saying like, let's catch someone that the need is hot.
Yeah, because I think you're right. You need both. You want to catch them in that moment. But if this is the first time they've ever heard of you, you might not have that trust established.
Exactly. And that's why we also see our utilization increase year over year. And it's the exact same thing as awareness. It's like creating that awareness in the first year would naturally create an increase in year two. It's not because they have more members in their member base by applying. It's not because they all of a sudden just like year two is and everyone wants to get a knee surgery. It's because of the awareness that we see grow over time.
Exactly. Well, Kaitlin, thank you so much for this conversation. It was, I think, super helpful for our benefits leaders. So really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah. Thank you, Nancy. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to Making Healthcare Sustainable. If you want to learn more, be sure to check out our YouTube channel, Lantern Specialty Care, or check out our website where you can find additional resources.